Hi everybody, if you found yourself watching this video but didn't see the others in this series yet, I would recommend giving them a watch just for some context. But otherwise, let's hop right into things. So here's the story so far. After both Link and Zelda had premonitions about Ganondorf basically being the worst dude ever and having intentions to get his hands on the Triforce, which he'll use to conquer Hyrule, Zelda hatches a plan with Link. She will protect the Ocarina of Time while Link gathers the remaining spiritual stones, which are the keys to accessing the Sacred Realm where the Triforce sits. Having achieved that by way of completing the previous 3 dungeons, we set back to meet Zelda at Hyrule Castle. However, as we approach the castle gates, Link's nightmares unfold before him. A storm swells up in the skies above him, the gates to Hyrule Castle town lower, just in time for a white horse to gallop away. Riding the horse is Impa, clutching the Princess Zelda tight. Zelda, seeing Link, makes a last-ditch effort to help him by throwing some object his way. It lands in the water behind him, and the horse carrying Zelda disappears out of sight. Just then, Link feels a presence from behind him. It's Ganondorf atop a dark horse. This is the same guy we saw in the courtyard with the evil eyes that Link and Zelda have both had nightmares about. The same guy we've been told has cursed the Deku Tree, causing his death, attempted to extort the Gorons by cutting them off from their food source, and caused ailment to Lord Jabu Jabu. This evil man, whose dark influence has been present at every turn of our adventure, now stands before us demanding to know which way Zelda went. Link refuses to give him an answer, instead choosing to draw his sword. This amuses Ganondorf. He basically swats Link aside with a magical blast and sets off in pursuit of Zelda. Yikes. With Ganondorf gone, we can retrieve the item from the water, and we find that it's none other than the titular Ocarina of Time. Zelda has somehow left some kind of psychic message with the Ocarina in order to teach you the Song of Time. Hey, side note, but did y'all know about this soldier in the back alley of Castletown? You could totally skip right over him, but if you take that extra moment of exploration to go out of your way and talk to him, goodness, he just dies in front of you. Rated E for everyone, I guess, right? Anyhow, now we have everything we need to complete the plan. With the 3 spiritual stones and the Ocarina of Time, we can proceed over to the Temple of Time and open the Door of Time. However, the Triforce doesn't seem to be here. Instead, we find that legendary blade, the one and only Master Sword. Pulling the blade shrouds us in a magical light, but despite this coolness, we have actually been misled. As we are pulled into the Sacred Realm, it turns out that Ganondorf actually followed us and stepped into the Sacred Realm too. When we come to, we find the Sage Roru. He dumps a bunch of exposition on us, but here's the cliff notes. As it turns out, Link was indeed the chosen hero of time. However, he was, for some reason, not old enough to actually wield the blade. So, it sealed his soul in the Sacred Realm for 7 years. Now we are old enough to hold the powerful blade, but that 7-year time gap has given Ganondorf more than enough time to conquer all of Hyrule. Our only chance of defeating him is to go awaken the other 5 sages at the various temples around Hyrule. Returning from the Sacred Realm back to the Temple of Time, we meet Sheik, a member of the Sheikah tribe. Sheik will give us a clue as to where we can find the temples, but gives us the hint to head over to Kakariko first to find the hookshot. Otherwise, we won't be able to even enter the first temple. Also, I have to mention this, the state of the world here is demonstrated really well in this moment. Even before we leave the Temple of Time, the lighting is darker and grimmer feeling than when we came in. But when we actually emerge back out to Castletown, we find it completely in ruin and taken over by Redeads. This site is something that has just always stuck with me as being among the best moments of world building in Zelda. It was only moments ago that we stepped out of the bustling Castletown market only to find this horrifying sight. It just gives me chills. Moving on, after erasing the now deceased Dampé's ghost, we will get the hookshot and be able to head to the Forest Temple. Navi may also chime in saying she's worried about what may have happened in Kokiri Forest during our 7-year absence, which is fair considering look what happened to Castletown, a guarded place with soldiers. Heading into the forest, we'll find things aren't looking good for the Kokiri either. We're immediately attacked by enemies in this once peaceful village, and all of the residents are hiding in their houses out of fear. Even though these are really simple enemies like Deku Babas and Scrubs, the Babas are huge compared to the ones we've faced up until now, especially considering Link's increased stature. Hey, can I mention that as much as I like this segment where you're sneaking around this maze, the Moblins here have some of the dumbest enemy AI in the entire series. Anyways, heading over to where we first found Saria 7 years ago, we find that she's missing. If we play Saria's song to try to communicate with her, she'll say that she's relieved to hear you're okay, and that the forest spirits were calling for help, so she's headed off into the Forest Temple. So now that we have the hookshot, we can ascend up to the previously out of reach ledge and actually enter the temple itself. There is a reason this dungeon often comes up as people's favorites. It's a personal favorite of mine, at least. The Forest Temple is an absolute masterclass in its design, its progression up the difficulty curve, its atmosphere, and thematics. While all 3 of Child Link's dungeons felt like pretty natural, real locations in this world, this one stands out from everything we've seen up until this point. Rather than a giant tree in the forest, a cave in a mountain, a fish in the river, which are all pretty logical locations, we instead find what appears to be an abandoned fort or castle, mansion, or some other structure hidden at the very back of the Lost Woods. A fortress with brick, stone, and even carpet, lost to time, becoming overgrown and retaken by nature, while spirits still wander the hallways. While not as natural in its design, the mystery and stark contrast in this design choice makes its atmosphere even better in my opinion. It's also impossible not to talk about this dungeon's music. The Forest Temple theme is absolutely perfect to me. There's just the right level of ambience mixed with a certain optimism that phases in and out. The instruments blend and shift in their levels. It's not what one would assume or think of when you hear forest-themed level, but neither is this architecture. And this juxtaposition of our expectations with its perfected sound design really elevates the experience of this dungeon to another level. In my opinion, it's one of the series' absolute best pieces of dungeon music. This dungeon is also a step up in difficulty, which is particularly great for Link's overall story. Since this is our first outing as adult Link, now wielding the legendary Master Sword and trying to save the world from a ruthless and evil ruler, it makes total sense that the enemies and puzzles we'd face in here would be in another league from everything we've seen before. Entering the foyer, we are immediately ambushed by 2 Wolfos. Up until now, we've only been forced to fight a Wolfos once as Child Link. That was a single Wolfos and was treated almost like a boss in its own right. But having to take on 2 of these guys simultaneously right off the bat like this is sure to test your mettle. These guys are way more of a challenge than the crappy Moblins we fought outside too, because they actually block, defend, and dodge, as well as time their attacks. Spin attacks are particularly useful for breaking their defenses, but charging it up also leaves you vulnerable to attack, so you may take that risk, or try a quick spin attack, or focus hard and time your attacks for those key moments when they leave themselves vulnerable. Once they're defeated, you can make your way to the next room, but first you have to make sure you inspect every nook and cranny of every room, because it may be very easy to walk through that door and miss out on the key that is hidden at the very top of the foyer room. Up until now, there has been no keys hidden in the dungeons, so unlocking doors has usually come down to finding a switch or completing a puzzle. Now, if you aren't using your big old brain and looking hard enough, you can come full stop to a locked door that you can't pass through. So you have to keep in mind not just the room at hand, but the dungeon as a whole bigger picture in order to progress. And it's absolutely essential that you be curious and explore everywhere you can. Otherwise, you just may find yourself stumped at a dead end. This dungeon also combines two elements from the previous two dungeons designs that I thought worked really well, and bloody well perfects them. We have in its layout the wonderful interconnectivity that Dodongo's Cavern first showed us, as well as the unraveling style progression on full display in Jabu Jabu's belly. Now here's how this dungeon accomplishes that. Proceeding through the foyer and past the hallway where we can easily dispatch this Skulltula thanks to the new hookshot we have, we come to the central room. In this central room are doors that all connect to pretty well the entirety of the dungeon. So 6 paths total before us. 4 Poes appear and remove the flames from those torches and disperse themselves to the various parts of the dungeon. When they do so, the central elevator, which happens to lead to the boss room, is closed off. So that eliminates one of the 6 paths immediately. The door to the east is on a ledge too high up to reach. The door to the northeast is locked via an eye switch, which you can't activate yet. The door to the west is also locked. The door to the northwest is blocked by time blocks, and so the door to the north is the only truly open path. However, you can play the Song of Time to remove the time blocks and open the northwest door, and if you nab that key in the foyer, you can unlock the west door immediately. However, that's not necessarily the best order for you to tackle these things. The game has left that north door open and ready for you to head into, so I always felt like this was a pretty strong hint as a starting point. Particularly because through that north door is one of the only sort of one and done paths that doesn't progress you much. Heading north will encounter a pair of Stalfos who, like the Wolfos before, are a great challenge for combat. Best these guys and you'll score a second key. From here, if you decide to head into the west room, you'll end up hitting locked doors. You'll actually need 3 total keys to progress down that path. So the next best option is to head into the northwest door by removing those time blocks. Through here, we'll find the first courtyard room. There's a well here that we can't do much with, and so the only way to progress is by scaling the vine wall at the far end of the room and heading through the door. This brings us to a small adjoining room which contains the map. The adjoining room bridges the upper levels of the 2 courtyards, so heading through the next door logically brings us out onto a balcony in the east courtyard, which mirrors its western counterpart. You can use your hookshot to zip over to another balcony, where you can press a switch to drain the wells in both courtyards, which as it turns out are connected via this lovely brick tunnel. Here we'll find our 3rd small key. Now that we've gotten the map, explored a fair amount of the dungeon, and gotten our keys, it's time to head back through the central room, spend one of our keys to unlock the western door, and ascend upstairs. In order to get up to the 2nd floor, we'll have to complete the sliding block puzzle room. The puzzle for progressing here is pretty simple, but I like that it forces us to use these blocks to build our own path up through this room, which is great as a puzzle on its own during your first trip through this room, but also means that if we have to backtrack through this room at any point, say, for example, if you missed one of the keys earlier, then you can quickly climb up through the blocks you've arranged in here, rather than doing the puzzle over again. Now that we're at the top, we'll spend a 2nd key to enter the first twisted corridor. As if the mysterious ghost-filled abandoned fort vibe wasn't cool enough already, the play with physics here is pretty impressive. Also, take note of that ornate treasure chest on the wall in this room. We'll come back for that soon. Passing through here, we'll spend our 3rd key and find ourselves in the first portrait room. You'll notice the first of the 4 Poe sisters, Joelle, hidden here inside of the portraits on the wall. If you approach her, she'll vanish and hide in one of the other portraits. So we can't do much here except for head down the stairs and into the next room. We'll find ourselves ambushed by Stalfos once again, and directly above the northern Stalfos room from before. So don't fall down the hole in the floor, or you'll have to backtrack quite a bit to get back up here. For some reason, the Stalfos can just walk on the air here. Figure that one out. Defeating the pair here brings down a platform with reinforcements, so we'll actually have to defeat 4 in this room total. Doing so will net us this dungeon's item, the bow. I have to say, having both the bow and the hookshot this early on is wonderful. Now that we have this, we can use it to fire at the Poe sisters hiding in their portraits in either direction from this room. Doing so will draw them out into the open, where we can fight them head on. Defeating Joelle from before will get us another much needed key, and moving forward to defeat the second Poe sister, Beth, in the next room will get us the compass. But we can't progress further east this way, so we'll need to make a very short backtrack using our new bow to hit the eye switch we passed earlier in the sliding block room in order to untwist the twisted corridor and nab the boss key from that ornate chest we saw before. Untwisting this room also opens a new path here, which will take us out into the upper ledge of the western courtyard from before, where we can nab another much needed key. The next door loops us back around the block room, so we can quickly get back up to the second floor while reducing backtracking to the central room. Retwisting the corridor and passing through both portrait rooms takes us over to the second twisted corridor. Except it's not twisted yet. So we'll need to carefully hit the switch in the next room to twist it up, which opens a path just like in the Western equivalent. Carefully passing through the checkerboard room with the falling ceiling, watch out for that by the way, we'll find a small puzzle with some push blocks, which will take us right into our confrontation with the third Poe sister, Amy. After defeating her, the next hallway brings us up to that out of reach eastern door in the central room, where the final sister, Meg, waits for us. Meg is our final combat challenge before the boss. Meg's fight here is different from that of her sisters. She'll make duplicates of herself, and you'll have to make sure to be precise and only hit the real one. It won't take long to take her down, and with that, the central elevator rises and our final path is open. After taking the elevator down to the small basement room, we'll need to tackle one more puzzle involving rotating this room to access different switches in the branching rooms here. I like this puzzle conceptually, but it's just a little too easy in my opinion. You can just keep rotating the room clockwise and you'll get through it all fairly easily. Now we find ourselves facing the final locked door to the boss room. When you first enter the boss room and ascend the stairs up to the central platform, you'll find the room to be empty. Paintings adorn the walls on all sides and the carpet sports an ornate design, but otherwise, there's nothing really of note here. It's not until you try to leave that you'll be suddenly locked in. The music cuts out and Link hears the familiar sound of a horse behind him. Turning, he'll be met with a familiar sight, Ganondorf, on his horse, just like from 7 years ago. Except it's not really Ganondorf himself. This is Phantom Ganon, an evil spirit created by Ganondorf in his own image. Talk about vanity. Like Baronade, this fight is broken into two phases. The first phase sees Phantom Ganon hiding in the paintings, just like the Poe sisters, but he'll pop out to launch an electric attack that has a huge radius of damage. Little known tip though, if you stand on one of the Triforce symbols in the corner of the arena, you'll be just barely out of reach, and you won't have to worry about his attacks. You'll need to use the dungeon item, the bow, to hit him as he's transitioning between the painting and the room. After hitting him enough, his horse will ditch him and leave him stranded in the room. At this point, he'll use his trident to launch energy balls at you. Navi will tell you to answer his attacks with an attack of your own, which, although a bit vague, is a decent enough hint that you can use your sword to deflect his attacks back at him in a classic match of Dead Man's Volley. You may find yourself deflecting a single attack back and forth quite a few times, its speed increasing with each strike. This is thrilling. I never get bored of this. If you manage to hit him with his own energy, he'll be grounded and open to attack. So make sure to seize the moment and rush him with some sword strikes. Once he's defeated, he'll start to burn up and die, just like the bosses before him, but you'll hear the voice of the real Ganondorf intervene. He'll remark that you've gained some slight skill and that Phantom Ganon was simply a worthless creation. Fighting the real him will be much harder. Rather than allowing Phantom Ganon to die peacefully, Ganondorf instead banishes him to the void between dimensions. Brutal. After grabbing our heart container, we are out of here. But rather than being warped outside, we find ourselves back in the Chamber of Sages, where we see Saria for the first time in 7 years. She now understands her destiny and is awakened as the Sage of the Forest. With another medallion collected, we are off. We find ourselves back in front of the deceased Deku Tree, where we meet the freshly grown Deku Tree Sprout. Since the curse on the forest is broken, a new Deku Tree can now grow, and all of the monsters in Kokiri Forest are gone too. He also tells us that the reason we have aged and grown up while the rest of the Kokiri remained children is because, well, Link is a Hylian. He's not a Kokiri. He was orphaned and raised among the Kokiri children as one of their own. With that exposition out of the way and the threat eliminated from the forest, we're off. So that's the dungeon. Overall, this dungeon has some of the best atmosphere, a wonderful balance of combat and puzzle solving, and the perfect marriage of interconnectivity in its layout and the unraveling linearity in its progression. It's optimistic when it needs to be, it's spooky and dangerous when called for, and most importantly, it's just the right amount of challenging. It implements design ideas that future dungeons and even later games would take notes from, and balances this with unique concepts that we've only seen here. My one and only gripe is that northeast door from the central room is actually completely pointless because you'll both enter and exit that connecting room through different doors already. So there's actually no need to ever have that door there, aside from making the dungeon more symmetrical in its layout. But aside from that one super tiny thing, this dungeon is darn near perfect in my eyes. This is not to say that the other dungeons are bad. In fact, we've still got some great ones ahead of us, but this one has always been among my favorites. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for when the next one comes out. You can also check out, I've got all of these dungeon design videos in a nice playlist here for you guys. I'm just gonna take a second to say thank you to those who decided to support me on Patreon as well, in particular those who supported at the cheese tier or higher, which includes Tetra, Brenda, and Callie. Thank you so much again, you guys, and I will catch you next time. Bye bye!